I've got this one recording in the background in full 1080p, so if you do miss anything, I'll be timestamping when I go through thing. So hopefully this is a good chance for you to learn some stuff. Just actually quickly, I should probably tweet that I'm actually it. And we do have pizza on the way, so I must thank Mrs. Zilla for that. Twitter. Alright, let's do a bit of and Ellie. Sorry I didn't say hello. Kind of just getting the intro out of the way. Thanks for popping in. Thanks. Alright, done. Alright, let's jump in. Or hugs. How you doing? Thanks for coming along. I am hoping that people learn some stuff from this. What I might actually do, I'm just gonna create a little timestamp pad here so that I know exactly I have done a portion. So we're going to start off going through the settings. I'll try and make this as large as possible for everyone. The problem with OBS is that it doesn't scale very well. Pain in the ass. So you might find that this will be better for you when you watch it on YouTube later if you have to. My stats gone. Where's my OBS stat? Oh, it doesn't give me the time? What? Ah, screw that then. Alright, so we are this. We go based off the recordings and jump into it. Awesome, all hugs. I will definitely try and get you set up. So what I'll be doing is I'll go through the basic settings and then I'll try and explain things like the bitrate and the encoders for each specific type of computer setup, because obviously everyone has a different computer, and that's the main reason why I wanted to do this, because a lot of people go on YouTube and they look at a tutorial and it's some dude with a fucking like GTX 1080 and he's using NVENC and he's got like 100 by 100 internet and he can stream whatever he wants. Whereas this tutorial is very focused on if you have absolutely rubbish internet and you have an absolutely rubbish computer, I can get you streaming. And that's what I really want to accomplish here. So, we're at about 3 minutes and we're going to go through the OBS basic settings. Alright, so the first page in OBS is purely relating to the layout of things. So obviously you've got your language, you've got your theme, whether or not OBS is going to check for updates automatically, whether or not you want stats to open on startup. What I would recommend doing here is obviously pick your language, pick a theme that you'd like. The dark theme scales with Windows, so you'll find that all of the text and stuff will scale really nicely. There is a light theme as well, which is still called default, and there's a new theme called Acri, which looks like this. They'll go through each theme. So this is Acri, this is a new theme, that's dark, this is light, and then you've got Rachni. So I've switched personally to Acri. I might actually run this for the rest of the tutorial because I find that the colors are very vibrant and it makes sense to look at. So what I would generally recommend doing is making sure that automatically check for updates on startup is ticked, because having OBS up to date all the time is the best thing you can do. I find a lot of people are still on like really ancient versions of OBS Studio, and they just have no idea that there's a new update out, and they wonder why their stream is really crap. So I do find that helps quite a bit. Opening stats dialog on startup. Now, I would recommend ticking that box, because what that does is, and I'll show you on just on the one that my stream is running. So you can actually get it via view and then stats. This is, where'd it go? This is arguably one of the best things you can possibly switch on, because what it's going to tell you is quite literally your stats for your stream. Now, it's going to show you your CPU usage. It's going to show you how much hard drive space you have available for like recordings, and also memory usage. Now, CPU and memory, when you're not running on X254, are purely related to probably browser sources. So if you're running Streamlabs and Stream Elements, you're going to be very reliant on having really good CPU. That's the biggest thing for this. Now, FPS is obviously the frames per second that you're going to have your stream set up at. So you can either have that at like 30 or 48, 59.97 or 60. I run my streams at 60 FPS. Average time to render a frame. Now, that is how long it's taking your encoder to render the frame. So at the moment, mine is taking about 2 milliseconds to render each individual frame before it sends it off. If you have any lag or any encoder issues, you'll find that the average time to render a frame is going to be huge. So you don't want to go any higher than 2-3 milliseconds to render a frame. Otherwise, you get that stutter, and it looks really crap. Now, frames missed due to rendering lag is purely related to that. So this is the amount of frames that have been lost because your renderer could not keep up with it. You'll find this happens a lot when, say, for instance, you're running on X254, you've got a dual core, and your CPU is essentially dying. You'll notice that will go red. You'll notice a massive amount of missed frames due to encoding, rendering or encoding lag, and that's going to be utterly painful for your stream. Skipped frames due to encoding lag is purely the encoders just decided, screw it, it's taking too long, I'm going to skip to the next frame. And I'm just going to keep skipping frames. And that's where you find a lot of streams end up with really bad stuttering. And it just looks utterly atrocious. Then along here, you've got the output. So if you're, say, doing a stream and you're recording, you'll see that the stream is either live or not. How many frames you've dropped. So dropping frames is when you haven't been able to send the frame through to the RMTP server. In this case, for me, it's Twitch. So I've had no network lag, dropped frames, no nothing. You'll find that if you're pushing your encoder too far, that'll happen quite a lot. Or if your internet connection is dropping out, you'll find that's usually really bad as well. Total data output is obviously how much data you've pushed in total. And the bitrate is your current bitrate. So because I use QuickSync, it doesn't run on the constant bitrate. It runs on like a variable bitrate. So I'm only pushing about 1,000 kilobits per second right now. And I'm recording as well. So that says that it's recording. And so far it's captured about 550 megabytes of recording files. And it's doing it at about 9,000 kilobits per second because I'm using NVEC, and I've got that set to a variable bitrate of 25,000, which means it'll go anywhere from 0 to 25,000. We'll go into that a little bit later. All right, so back to the settings. So the next section is the output, where it will show confirmation dialog for whether you want to confirm before you start the stream. So when you hit start stream, it goes, are you sure you want to start streaming? And the same goes for stopping it. You can also set it up to automatically record when the stream starts. So when you start streaming, your recorder will go away and start recording as well. So you don't have to click both buttons at once. Now, there is also some settings here that are currently grayed out because I don't use them and I haven't got other settings enabled to get them there. One is keep recording when stream stops. So what that means is once you hit stop streaming, because you don't want to stream anymore, it's going to keep recording. So there are various use cases for where, say, for instance, you record on Twitch, but then you send it to, or you stream to Twitch, but then you record it to YouTube. What you can do is if you don't want to say, and thanks to my YouTube viewers, while you're on Twitch, you can literally stop the stream, go thanks to my YouTube viewers, and then stop the recording and then upload that to YouTube. So that's one of the ways you could do that if you were so inclined. Then we also have the automatically start replay buffer when streaming. So what that is, a replay buffer is part of a new script. So what it does is it saves, say, 30 seconds of prior. So say you've got now, it's saved 30 seconds back here so that you can replay that on your stream. So it's like I believe NVIDIA has something similar. That's essentially what OBS is trying to replicate. And the keeping the replay buffer active when stream stops basically means that there's a little bit of a buffer in there. Those two settings you'll generally find you won't touch. Unless you know what you're doing with them, there's really no point to doing it. And it does increase the amount of resources that your computer will use. And then we have source alignment snapping. Now this is basically so that when you add a source to OBS, it snaps to a corner, to another source. It's purely that. I'll show that off later, what the two settings mean. So obviously the snap sensitivity, like, do you want it to literally, the moment it's like really close, to just snap to another element? Or do you want it to kind of just hang close by? Snap sources to edge of the screen. It's pretty obvious, it's going to snap the moment it hits the screen. And then snapping to other sources. And then also snapping sources to horizontal and vertical center. Now, I haven't played around with this too much because all my overlays are all set up, but generally that means that it'll snap to the center of your template. Projectors, you won't really ever need to touch this. I find this has really done nothing to improve my stream. It's really only when you, say, want to have a second screen and show, I'll show it off in a second, the multi-view, that's about it. System tray, obviously, if you want to minimize OBS to the system tray, you'd hit enable. When you want to minimize when it starts up so it doesn't pop up on your screen, it just stays in the background. And then always minimize to system tray instead of taskbar. So instead of showing up down here, it's going to show up all the way on the other side in your system tray. And then studio mode. This is a new feature that they've added. So what this does is, so say for instance you have a bunch of scenes and you've got studio mode where you can see the scene you want to go to and then the scene you're currently on. You would essentially click that so that it will only transition when you double click to it instead of single clicking. It was originally single click, so the moment you clicked on it, it would transition. Whereas now it's double click, which I find handy. It stops accidental stuff. Portrait vertical layout basically means that you'll see a scene up the top and a scene down the bottom versus a scene on the left and on the right. And I'll show that off later once we get into the scenes and studios. And then obviously multi-view layout, which I'll show, is basically which orientation you want multi-view to be in. But I'll show that later. All right, so that's the OBS basic general settings. Are there any questions? Does anyone in the chat have any questions about just the general settings and what you want to enable before we move on to doing a bit of just some quick stream and then output? If you don't, we'll move on. Or what we'll do now is we'll go into stream. So stream is very obvious. So this is obviously where you would grab your stream key from Twitch, paste it in there, generally find the server that's closest to you. What sort of internet would you want before streaming? I would say, to be honest, if you want to just record in 720p, 30 FPS, you can record at a bitrate as low as 750 kilobits a second, which means you can technically stream on ADSL 1. I would say if you want to start streaming at higher bit rates, obviously you're going to need a lot faster internet. But there is nothing really stopping you from streaming at really low bit rates. You'll just find you'll need to rely... You couldn't use something like NVEC, which at low bit rates quite literally looks like rubbish. And I'll get into that a little bit later as well, with bit rates and the different encoders. But ideally, if you're on ADSL 2+, you should at least be getting 2 megabytes up, which means you can run at like a 1500, 2000 bit rate. Trying to really think. I mean, I would say you'd want at least an upload of 20 megabits a second before you really start pumping some really good high quality bit rate in there. So yeah, it's really going to depend. I would recommend anywhere from 20 up. 20 megabits per second up is perfect, but you can also stream at lower upload speeds. Yeah, perfect. 60 down, 32 up, perfect. You'll be able to stream... I mean, I would say you could stream in 900p, which is what I currently stream at 60 FPS. So yeah, you're pretty much not going to have any issues whatsoever with that. All right, so I'll go back to the stream. So obviously, depending on where you're based, you'll pick a server. Obviously, because I'm in Australia, I've got the option of Sydney. That's it. I don't have any other options, so I'll be selecting that. Put the stream key in. Apply. Done. Perfect. Now, you also have other services in here, so if you want to output to YouTube or Mixer, YouTube Live, Twitter, you can do that in here. This is primarily for Twitch, so if you do want to experiment with other services, you can do that yourself, or there's probably another tutorial out there. What I'm also going to touch on is custom streaming servers. So if you do run a streaming PC, which you've set up to do RTMP, this is where you would add it. And I won't go too much into that because that's a bit more of an advanced. Alright, and now I'm going to go to output, which is the part that everyone here probably wants to see, because the output is going to make or break your stream. Now, the first thing you obviously want to do when you come in here is change the output mode from simple to advanced, so you can actually change the settings a little bit more than what you did. Now, I currently have access to every encoder except the AMD encoder. Now, the AMD encoder, as far as I'm aware, is a little bit buggy with OBS. There's not a lot of information about it, but it works very similar to NVEC. So if you're looking to use NVEC, you can essentially use the same type of settings for the AMD encoder, but in general, I would avoid the AMD encoder unless you have a really high-end AMD card, because it does chew a bit of the GPU resources to pull it off. So, I'm going to start with X264, because X264 is the most common one that people just jump to, because it should be the best, right? So, what is X264? Well, it's literally your CPU doing all the encoding. So the more cores you have on your CPU, the better it's going to encode. The less CPU cores you have, the more problems you're going to have. I would generally recommend using X264 if you have an AMD card or you have more than 4 cores. If you have less than 4 cores, you're going to have to really play around with these settings to get a good mix of encoding power and also being able to still play your games. So a game like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is extremely CPU intensive now after 1.0. So you're going to really need to balance that out. Do you want to play PUBG really nicely, or do you want to output to stream really nicely? And you'll find most people want to play PUBG very nicely versus encoding, because let's face it, the gameplay is more important than the stream. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about X264 now, and I'll basically go through the basic settings of how you can get this right. Now, this takes into account the fact that you're running on an upload speed of at least 20 megabits per second, I will go into short detail about if you're running less and what bit rates to use. So for X264 streaming to Twitch, usually running at a bitrate of about 2500 for 720p 30 FPS is perfect. If you want to jump up to, say, 900p, which is a lot better than 1080p for Twitch, you'll probably want to run at a bitrate of at least 4800. Now, why do you want a higher bitrate? Well, you're pumping a higher resolution to Twitch, and in pumping that higher resolution over an encoder, you get pixelation. So if you were to keep your bitrate at 2500 and stream at 900p or 1080p to Twitch, you're going to end up with big blotches all over your stream. And you'll notice this on some of the really new streams, is they look really blotchy, and it looks rubbish, and the game looks absolutely crap. And then you go to someone else's stream, and it looks immaculate, and you're like, how the hell does that stream look so blotchy and this stream looks immaculate? And it is the bitrate. Most people get the bitrate wrong from the get-go, and it is the biggest problem when you're starting out, is trying to find the right bitrate. Now, I run my streams obviously on QuickSync now, where the bitrate is a little bit different to NVENC or X264. So I used to run NVENC at least 4800 bitrate, and that was to output to 900p 60 FPS, and it looked pretty good. I couldn't argue with it. I was getting really good quality to Twitch. So let's go through X264. First thing you want to untick is the enforce streaming service encoder settings, because it's going to overwrite whatever you do down here, and you don't want that, because if you put the effort into getting this just right, if you tick that box, Twitch is going to say, use these settings, it'll be fine, it'll be perfect, and then you wonder why your stream looks like crap. First thing to do, untick this. Now, if you have rescale output ticked, and if you're not doing a simultaneous recording, untick this. You only need to tick this if, say, for instance, you're streaming to Twitch at 720p, but you want to record to your local machine in 1080p. That is the only reason you would ever tick that. And I'll show you why in a second. Now, rate control. Twitch recommends, and I say recommends because I have seen VBR streams before, they recommend that you use CBR, so that no matter what, OBS is going to push a 2500 bitrate to Twitch. Now, this helps their servers from getting absolutely smashed, and that's about it. If you were to select variable bitrate, what that's going to do is it's going to tell OBS, alright, so our max bitrate is 2500, but we're okay if you stream at 500, because there's not a lot going on the screen at the moment. And I believe YouTube is the only one that allows it. Twitch is a little bit iffy about it. They would prefer that you not use it. This is also good for recordings, and I'll go into the recordings in a second. But as a rule of thumb, CBR is perfect, especially if you have a really good internet connection. If you do have issues where the upload will fluctuate, I would say go with VBR and set your bitrate to about as good as you can get and see how that goes. Obviously do a few test streams, but you'll find that if you do have really wavy upload speeds, then VBR might be better for you. But I don't generally recommend doing that straight off the bat until you've really tuned CBR and found that you have issues with it. Now, custom buffer size. Generally leaving this at the max bitrate is fine. I find if you drop it a couple of hundred off your normal bitrate, it may help if you're having some choppiness. But as a rule of thumb, you generally leave that about where your bitrate is, or not at all. That also depends on how powerful your CPU is. If you have a really powerful CPU, don't worry about it. Keyframe interval. Now, it's going to set it to 0 and rely on auto. But guess what? We unticked the enforced streaming service encoder settings. So we will need to set that to 2. Now, these boxes here are the ones that get everyone. People have no idea what they mean, and it's very hard to get this right. This is the part where you quite literally have to select one that you think is going to be best for your stream. Now, the way that this works is ultra fast means it's going to use nearly no CPU to encode, and your stream is going to look like crap. Placebo is where it's going to use as much CPU as it possibly can and make your stream look as good as possible. The trick is to find the best ratio for your stream and your specs. As a rule of thumb, fast in the middle is usually the one that most people go with. This will work fine if you even have 4 cores with the 4 threads. If you have more, you would generally still keep it to fast as well, purely because fast is the best quality to performance ratio. Profile. You're going to set that to high. Every time, you're going to set that to high. Because by setting it to high, it makes it look crisper in my testing. Tune. Don't bother touching tune. Unless you want your stream to look a certain way, which I don't know why you would do that. You don't need to change this whatsoever. Twitch doesn't care about the tuning. It's completely irrelevant. So with this setting, and I'm going to go through a couple of bit rates. So let's use Allhugs' internet for an example. He has 60 down, 32 up. So what does that mean? Well, he has 32 up, which means that he can stream anywhere from a bitrate of 0 all the way up to about 3,000. Now the trick here is to find the right middle ground, because you're not always going to be able to keep a constant 3,000 kilobits per second bitrate. It's just not going to happen, because internet is usually a little bit unreliable. What we really want to do is find the perfect bitrate for stability. In Allhugs' case, with 32 up, you want to run at about anywhere between 2,000 to 2,800. And then find a really nice middle ground in there where you don't have any stutter, pixelation, or anything like that to Twitch. So I would probably imagine that Allhugs would be able to use 2,500 quite comfortably with these settings, as long as they have a quad core or higher. You would have no issues with these settings right here. If you did have settings with a quad core, what you would do is probably bring the CPU usage preset down and not touch anything else, because the most resource consuming part is the preset. This is what's going to determine how much CPU usage you are doing. So, are there any questions about X264 before I move on to NVEC? Okay, how do I check my PC stats more detailed? Alright. Easiest thing to do is to pretty much right click on your start button and then go system. Now, you might say, well, that's only showing me my CPU. Well, yeah, that's in the case of X264, that's all that's going to matter. So what you're going to need to look for is your processor, and in some cases your RAM, because if you're running a lot of browser sources, you're going to need a lot of RAM. So those two there are perfectly fine, and it's not a problem at Allhugs. Not a problem at all. It's what this stream is for. The other one you're going to want to do is you want to right click on the start button again and go device manager. And what that's going to do is show you everything else that you have. And the key thing that you're looking for here is probably your display adapter. So on my PC, because I have the Intel CPU's integrated graphics enabled, I have that chip here. And then I also have my GTX 1070 displayed here. So you can correlate with these two, that you have your processor, which in my case is just a quad-core i7 6700 with 32 gigabytes of RAM. And I'm running the Intel HD Graphics 530, which I'm using for QuickSync. And I also have my NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1070, which is obviously my main graphics card. So what you want to do, and this is the biggest thing about OBS. OBS really doesn't care about your GPU if you're running CPU-based encoding. The only thing your GPU is going to be used for is gaming. and previewing OBS. You'll find, in most cases, as long as you're running a GTX 1060 up, graphics won't be a problem. If you're running pretty much, I would say the minimum CPU you would run a nice, clean OBS-based stream from would be an i5. I would not stream on an i3 or lower, because at that point you're getting into dual core and you don't have any cores, if that makes sense. So if you've got an i5 of a last gen, you obviously have 4 physical cores, but no threads. If you have a current generation i5, you have 6 cores and no threads. So that's really good. They're really good for streaming. But if you have an i7 and up, even better. Obviously, in the new one, I think they have like 6 cores and 6 threads in the new i7s, which is unbelievable. The performance is unreal. In the AMD camp, I mean, I wouldn't stream on anything less than a Ryzen 5. You can do a Ryzen 3, but I would recommend Ryzen 5 for a clean stream. So Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, they're going to be the best. And then obviously if you have Threadripper, well, what's the point of doing anything? You might as well just set everything to max and you'll be fine. But that's how you find your base settings. But like I said, for X264, the more cores you have, the better. That's quite literally all that matters with this kind of encoder, is CPU power. And obviously you'll be able to also see how many CPU cores you have by going into the task manager and going to performance, and in CPU you'll see how many cores you have. So in this case, and you'll see down here, my CPU is running at 3.4 gigahertz. It has 4 cores, but 8 logical processors, which means that it has 4 physical cores and then 4 essentially virtualized cores. So you've got 4. Perfect. So in that case, you could run X264 if you didn't have, say, a CPU with integrated graphics, which would mean you could run QuickSync, or you have an NVIDIA or AMD GPU that has its own encoder, so NVENC or the AMD encoding engine. As a rule of thumb, I tend to tell people to stay away from X264 these days, unless you have more than 4 cores. Because a lot of games are very CPU intensive now, which means that you're going to really need to think about whether you want to trade off that. Alright, I'm going to jump into NVENC, because this is where everyone loves to point people to do. Go NVENC. NVENC is amazing. NVENC is the bee's knees. NVENC is the bee's knees if you're streaming at a bitrate over 4,000. If you can't stream at a bitrate over 4,000, and I say this because NVENC really needs a lot of bitrate to look really nice. You can run at a bitrate of 2,000 thereabouts with NVENC, but you're going to notice that your stream looks very blotchy and washed out. NVENC was purely designed for recording. It was never really designed for it as an encoder. It was never really designed for streaming, which is why a lot of people tend to stream with a different encoder than NVENC and then record with NVENC, because the overhead for recording with NVENC is extremely low. So as a rule of thumb, only use NVENC if you're willing to sacrifice the quality of the stream, or you have no other option. I was using NVENC for pretty much the first 3 months of streaming. I was able to run at a bitrate of about 42 to 4800 with no problems, and it looked fine. I won't say that it didn't look rubbish, because it looked perfectly fine. But you do need to be able to push a bitrate of 4,000 or above for it to look really good. If you're running at a bitrate any lower than 4,000, you're going to find that it does look very washed out, which is a shame, because NVENC is a really nice encoder and there's nearly no overhead to using it. So, like before, enforce streaming service encoder settings, get rid of it, and rescale output should only be ticked if you're, say, wanting to record in a higher resolution than you're streaming at. For rate control, You can run this in CBR. I would recommend running it in CBR. For the bitrate, don't go any lower than 2500 for the bitrate on NVENC, unless you have no choice. If you were to run NVENC on, say, an ADSL1 connection, where you might be able to pull off a bitrate of 750 kilobytes a second, it's going to look rubbish. But you'll be able to do it with nearly no overhead to your gaming or performance in general. So 2500 for the bitrate is a minimum for NVENC, and then obviously you can go up from there. NVENC was designed to run at a bitrate of at least 25,000. So you can imagine how little bitrate it's using when it's streaming to Twitch. NVENC was designed for really high quality recording via NVIDIA's Shadowplay, and it does do really good recordings in OBS. I will not fault that. I cannot fault that. It is perfect for recording. For streaming, it does have downsides, like I've mentioned. So 2500 and up is the best bitrate for NVENC, unless you really have no choice. So say, for instance, you're running a dual-core CPU, and you have, say, a 1060, you would just go with NVENC. You've really got no other option. Now, keyframe intervals. Always set this to 2. No matter what that says, always set that to 2. Preset. Now, presets are fun. So, with NVENC, you always want to make sure that it's set to high quality. If you don't set it to high quality, no matter what you do, it's going to look the blotchiest pile of crap you've ever seen. You can leave it at default if you're desperate, but I would recommend high quality every single time. If you're able to stream at a really high bitrate, still keep it on high quality. Thank you for the host, Cat. Alright. That do. Okay. Alright. Profile. Main. Always main. Main is perfect for NVENC. You shouldn't need to touch that. Level. Auto. Just keep it as auto. You don't really need to touch profile and level ever. You only would really ever touch these if you were doing NVENC recording, which obviously you're not doing because you're streaming. Use 2-pass encoding. Make sure this is ticked. GPU. Now, say for instance you had 2 GTX 1070s, but you want to use one of them for encoding and one of them for gaming. Don't. Just don't. Don't ever change the GPU. Keep it at 0. That is it. Never change it. Keep it at 0. Even if you have multiple GPUs, 0. B-frames, stay at 2. And that is NVENC. So NVENC, in summary, is a really good encoder if you have a really high upload speed. If you don't have a very high upload speed, you can use it if you're desperate or you have no other option. But it is a really good, solid encoder, and that's fine. So in Cat's instance where Cat has 2 GPUs, not an SLI, see, the thing with NVENC is it's not using any GPU power. So you could be playing a game and there is no graphics overhead whatsoever. Because the NVIDIA, I believe it's the 970 and up, have a chip specifically for video encoding and decoding. So what that means is you've got Mr. GPU over here, which is doing all the graphics for your games, and you've got Mr. Encoder over here. Well, guess what? These don't do anything with each other. They're completely separate things. They don't interact. They don't have anything. All they're sharing is a PCI lane. That is it. So if you're doing a recording at, say, like I am now at 2500 bit rate recording, 25,000 bit rate for recording, there's no GPU overhead. I could go into a game and stream at its full settings, and there's going to be no loss whatsoever. If you've got 2 GPUs, say you're using one GPU for encoding and one for gaming, there's no point. Brutally honest, there is no point. You are better off just having one GPU to do both. it was a common misconception with NVEC when it first came out that it actually killed graphics performance in general, but it's a complete lie. It's the thing. So Nvidia has had shadow play for a very long time. So yeah, there's no graphics overhead. Otherwise, why would Nvidia include it as like a core package on their graphics driver? Absolutely, cat. So if you really need physics, then having a dedicated card for physics, 100%. If you've got one card and you've got it for physics, I recommend, if you're going to be using NVEC, and I say this because I've tested it, make sure physics is set to like something like the CPU, or if you do have another card, to the other card. Because if physics is running on the card that you are encoding from with NVEC, you get stutter. And I've tested this. I thought, what the hell? Turned out, physics. That was all it was. Physics. Stupid. Had no sense. But that was it. Alright, so any questions about NVEC, any specific settings you want to know about NVEC, anything you'd like me to go through? Because NVEC is honestly the most common encoder on Twitch right now, still, despite there being better alternatives. All right. Let's move on to my new favorite encoder, QuickSync. If you have an Intel... Yeah, absolutely, cat. That's perfectly fine. Now, I'm going to talk now about my new favorite encoder, QuickSync. Now, if you have, and you can check this yourself. All you need to know is your model of CPU and know how to Google search. So once you know your model of CPU, literally put it into Google, you'll find the Intel Arc website, and I'm going to do this myself just to show you. So we're going to type in Intel i7 6700, and we're going to go to the first one, which is literally arcintel.com. It's going to tell you everything about your CPU. Now, the key thing that you're looking for is whether or not it has processor graphics. And what you're then looking for is a line that says Intel QuickSync Video. And if that says yes, prepare to have some fun. Now, in my case, I have an Intel HD Graphics 5300, which is a very capable iGPU. It was one of the first decent iGPUs that Intel put on their chips. And it's perfect for streaming. I am currently streaming on QuickSync right now at 900p, 60 FPS. I have dropped a couple of frames because I was doing a little bit of magic. And holy crap. I would imagine if you're running this on the source, it looks bloody amazing. I cannot fault QuickSync. It is my encoder of choice now. I don't want to ever leave it, although I'm going to one day upgrade to AMD. This encoder change your streams forever if you have an i5, hell, even if you've got an i3 and up. So, the real trick here is enabling it. Now, a lot of motherboards in their BIOS have a switch for what graphics processing unit to use. Now, you're going to need to make sure, yeah, 900p is source. So if you look at my streaming source, it's 900p, and as long as you can stream it, it should look immaculate. Now keep in mind, I'm currently streaming 900p at a bitrate of under 2000, and that's how nice it looks for under 2000 kilobits per second bitrate. How does it do it, you ask? Well, Intel's encoder is really, really good. I cannot fault it. It is amazing. How come I don't get options? I don't know. Probably because I haven't streamed much lately, I would imagine. Now, the biggest thing that you're going to find with QuickSync is the chances are you won't see it in your list. And that's because the first thing you need to do is make sure that in your BIOS, the video processing unit, you should find this in probably like the advanced settings. You may have to check per your motherboard's manual. To set that to anything but auto. If you have it set to auto, it's going to just think that your computer only has its big graphics card, and that's it. And it's never going to show you QuickSync. If you set that to yes, I think it's onboard video, onboard graphics card, or something similar, you'll find a setting on your motherboard. If you set that to yes, it's going to allow you to use the integrated graphics from your CPU and the GPU. So you're going to have the option of both. The second step is to actually install the Intel graphics driver. Do a reboot, boom, you're going to have QuickSync in OBS. Now this does vary by GPU, all that stuff. GPU varies by CPU, and you'll find that it's really easy to get going once you've enabled it in the BIOS. Like I said, you might have to check your motherboard's manual, your motherboard support site to find out how to enable it, but that is quite literally what you're looking for. Now, like before, select QuickSync from the drop down once you have it enabled, untick Enforce Streaming Service Encoder Settings, and untick Rescale Output unless you're recording and streaming at the same time, and recording at a higher resolution. Now, I'm going to quickly just bring up my settings on my main OBS. So I've got this set up perfectly. So, I've opted to quite literally go target usage quality, because I don't need it to be balanced because I'm not using the iGPU for anything, and I don't need it to be speed, well, because I'm not using the iGPU for anything. So I can quite literally go for quality, because all this graphics card is doing is encoding. It's doing nothing else. Now, profile. High. Why would you go anything other than high? You're not using it for anything. Big frame interval, 2, because that's what Twitch wants. Async depth. Now, I found that async depth of 4 is perfect. I believe it controls how blotchy the stream is, based on what I've determined, doing some recordings with different settings. Keep that at 4. Rate control. Now, here's the fun bit. Screw CBR and screw VBR. Run ICQ. ICQ is, I would say, a nice mixture of, it's basically next generation CBR with a bit of variable bitrate control in it. So at the moment I'm streaming at just under 1,000 kilobits a second. Fine. It's perfect. I'm not outputting a lot of video. Why do I need to output at 2500 and be wasting bandwidth? There's no point. ICQ is a next gen rate control, and the overhead is near nothing. It's perfect. ICQ quality set to 23. What that essentially means is at 23, your stream is going to be a nice mix of not blotchy and really high quality. As you can probably see by my stream now, I based on when I looked at it on my iPad Pro, which has really high resolution, it looks perfectly fine. Now let's have a look at the overhead. So Windows 10 has a really nice new GPU layout in their task manager in the creators update, which shows essentially what the GPU is doing. So at the moment, what you're going to look for here is the video decode. So me right now outputting a 900p at what is essentially a variable bitrate is only using around about 23% of the Intel graphics. Compared to if I was using NVENC, and right now I can show you when it's recording, NVEC is only using about 10% of the video encode right now, doing a 25,000 kilobit per second recording of the stream. 3D is going to show, you know, the desktop environment, so, you know, the transparent taskbar, the transparent window bars. OBS's preview is going to be included in that whole 3D. But video encode is what you're looking for in this setting to see how much of a throttle you're getting. So in theory, there's nothing stopping me from outputting a 4K stream to Twitch if I was so inclined, and I still have plenty of overhead on the iGPU. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you switch to QuickSync is the bee's knees. It is unbelievably powerful. So, again, if you have QuickSync, target usage, quality, profile, high, keyframe interval, 2, async depth, 4, rate control, ICQ, 23. And no, she's not behind me on. That my green screen is literally in the walkway, so I'm the only way in and out. Alright. Does anyone have any questions about QuickSync? Because I could sit here and talk for hours about how amazing QuickSync is. And again, if you've missed anything, the recording is going on YouTube after this, once I've cut it. There you go, cat. Now she scratched my head. Alright. Alright. Exactly, cat. I was using NVEC since I started, and I thought, oh yeah, I might have a look at QuickSync. I'm never going back, ever. It's like encoding off your CPU, but there's no CPU overhead because it's using the graphics unit of the CPU. And to be honest, I think it's better quality than just the standard stock X264 encoder because there is no overhead. I think it's the bee's knees. It's amazing. No. I did. Back in the day, back when Twitch was really early, I tried. But the biggest problem back then is nobody was really sharing how they were doing anything. And nobody actually knew the right bit rates to use. And there was no Sydney Twitch server. So you can imagine trying to stream on ADSL to Asia. I think it was only Asian ones back then. But it was many, many moons ago now. Alright. I'm going to move on to recording. Because recording is going to be very easy. Yeah. It's all about messing with settings. That's the biggest thing. Alright. So, let's jump over to recording. Because recording is another good thing. So, say for instance you want to stream, but then you also want a really high quality recording to say upload to YouTube or another service. What you're going to need to do is think really long and hard about what encoder you're going to use for streaming, but then also look at what encoder options you have for recording. So, first setting here is pretty obvious. Where do you want your videos to go? Doesn't matter if they're on a hard drive, an SSD, just be prepared for them to be rather big, depending on how high your stream output is. Recording format. Change this to MKV. Always change this to MKV. Why? Well, if you stream to MP4, and for some reason OBS crashes, it's going to kill the entire recording. And cat, no. I don't record to an SSD, I record to just normal mechanical hard drives, 7200 RPM drives. but it's fine recording to 5400 RPM drives, as long, and I'll say this, as long as you're not playing the game from the same drive, because then you're essentially reading and writing to it, and reading and writing. Yeah, it's just not good. So yeah, generally you'd use a drive that is only going to be doing recording and not necessarily playing a game from. If you wanted to record to an SSD, you could. I don't see any point. Now, recording format. Always switch this to MKV, because, like I said, if OBS crashes in the middle of your recording on MP4, guess what? You lose the entire recording. So if you were recording for like 3 hours and OBS suddenly crashed, guess what? That 3 hours is now lost. How ass would that be? I find that would be utterly the worst. It doesn't just run out? No. So, I mean, most modern SSDs are designed for constant read and writes for probably like 5-6 years. And I mean like constant. And a mechanical hard drive, well, they're designed to essentially last forever. If you were recording to a specific type of drive, or you had something, and I'm not saying they're crap drives, but say for instance you had a Seagate drive, I would not be doing anything with that. I would throw that in the bin. I would throw it in the deepest pit you could possibly find. Alright, so recording format, MKV, all the time. Audio track. Generally, you'd set this depending on how many audio tracks you have. Generally, that's 1. Encoder. Make sure you're always using a different encoder to what your stream is doing. So in my instance, I'm using QuickSync to output to Twitch, which means I'm going to use my GPU to record. Makes logical sense, doesn't it? Now, say for instance, you wanted a recording in 720p, but your video output is 1080p. Hit rescale output. Done. Rate control. For streaming, you don't need to use CBR. I would recommend CBR, because what that means is it's going to keep recording, and if it does have any issues, well, it's just going to adjust. It's going to work its stuff out and just variably change it. Bitrate. Here's the fun bit. Unlike streaming, where you're limited to like 4500 max, if you're lucky, you can go 25,000. You could do 50,000 if you wanted better, and trust me, if you want to do that, you can. Play around with it. I find 25,000 is the best bitrate for quality to just, recording performance, but you can go higher if you really want to. Keyframe interval, you can keep it 0 because it's not going to anything stream related. Preset, high quality, profile, high, level, auto. And then leave everything else as it is. And that is going to get you the nicest 1080p 60 FPS video you have ever seen. Because, like I've mentioned before, NVEC looks better the higher the bitrate it has. So you can imagine at a bitrate of 25,000, it's going to look amazing. It's going to essentially look like it is on your screen at that time. Now, if you had QuickSync, because you're using a CPU, or X264, essentially try and get your bitrate as high as you can, and leave this and get the settings as high as you can. So if you were using your CPU to record, you're better off going for something like slow with a profile of main. That would be perfect. And then obviously your bitrate can be as high or as low as you want. I won't go too much into QuickSync for recording because the point of this tutorial is to make people aware that QuickSync exists for streaming encoding. So I won't really go into how to record with QuickSync, but it's essentially the same as if you were streaming, except you could probably stick with ICQ and maybe put your ICQ quality up a bit, because the ICQ is essentially your bitrate. So what that means is you could probably set that to like 30, and that should give you a really nice quality. But I won't go too much into QuickSync because I would generally recommend using that for streaming and then using something like NVEC for recording. So, any questions about recording? And Cat, yes, you're accurate. I don't like Seagate. Don't like Toshiba either. All right. Now, audio. Audio is easy. Track 1, set it to 32, 320. 320. Set it to 320. The FireCuda drives, I crap you not, the FireCuda drives, the only one I could ever say is fine in a Seagate. Their mechanical drives, without their hybrid, is really crap. They are atrociously made. Their quality control is really bad. And when you've had and seen as many Seagates die as I have, you'll want to avoid Seagates for the rest of your life. But the FireCuda drives are as good as you're going to get. Because guess what? They're essentially Western Digital enterprise drives. So yeah, the FireCuda drives are quite literally the only ones I could ever recommend in Seagate, because they are quite literally Western Digital enterprise hybrid drives. Alright, back to audio. 320. Always set your audio to 320, because Twitch makes your audio sound like crap if it's set to anything lower. Twitch will not accept the 320 as an audio bitrate, and it will downsample it, but it sounds much better than 160. If you do have internet issues and you are streaming at a lower bitrate, generally I would recommend maxing it out at least 256, but 320 for the audio bitrate is what I would recommend if you have the ability to stream at a bitrate of 2500 and above. Your audience will appreciate the fact that your audio does not sound absolutely atrocious as fuck. Now, that is all you need to know about audio. Obviously, if you have extra tracks, set them as you need. As a rule of thumb for recording, your bitrate wants to be as high as it can. So setting that to 320 is going to benefit your stream and your recording as well. I'm not going to touch on replay buffer because, in all honesty, I don't see a point to it. If it was something you were looking to do, I would imagine there's probably a really good tutorial about it and how to set it up properly. Now we're going to go on to real audio settings, which aren't related to your stream. Sample rate. 44.1 is perfectly fine. You should never need to adjust this. Channels. Now, OBS 21 introduced the fact that instead of just having mono and stereo, you can now output up to 7.1. Twitch allows 7.1, which I think is completely pointless. Most people are watching your stream on a mobile device. A phone with 2 speakers does not have 7.1 surround sound. It's going to just sound trash. Unless you're doing a recording and you're uploading it to somewhere that you really want surround sound, stereo. If you really want to output your full surround sound setup, 7.1. Just go for it if you're doing recording. But if you're streaming, stereo is perfectly fine. Now, your desktop audio device, depending on how you set up your audio devices, and I'll show you the separate ways you can set up audio devices, you can leave that either disabled or to whatever device you essentially want to output your stream's audio from. So say you have a headset, you'd select your headset from the list. and then that would mean that all audio from your headset is going to get output to your stream. The same goes for the mic auxiliary audio device. Select your microphone, done, dusted. Now, as part of the new OBS update, they've added an audio meter, which is really, really good for knowing whether or not you're too loud or too soft. I've set the audio meter decay rate to medium on my primary OBS, but you can leave that as fast if you really are inclined to. Basically what that means is you're going to be able to see for a little bit longer how high or low your audio was, and it should also show you where you peaked, versus fast, which will just decay it very quickly. You won't really ever need to touch the push to talk settings here. If you're inclined to enable them, go for it. But you should never really ever need to touch. Alright, let's move on to video. This is where you're going to control what your max video output settings are. So most of the time people will set this to 1920 by 1080 for their base canvas resolution, which is this here, where you add all your sources and everything like that. And then their output scaled resolution is generally what resolution they're going to stream at. Now, this is all well and good if you're not doing recording, but if you are doing recording at the same time as you are streaming, keep this the same as your canvas resolution and rescale the output here. So say for instance you're recording in 1080p, but you want to output to Twitch in 720p, come in here and change that to 720, but keep your video at its full resolution. Now, the downscale filter is something that's also very important because this can help reduce the blotchiness of your stream. As a rule of thumb, avoid bilinear at all costs. It is atrocious. If you're running NVEC, always use the Lanka's stream downscale filter, because that's going to really make it look as sharp as it can without any issues. The same with QuickSync. I run up the 32 samples with QuickSync, no problems. If you are running at a low bitrate and you can't push as much data as you think, go with Bicubic. It's not that bad if you're using X264 or QuickSync, but I would never use the settings for NVEC. It does not look good. It looks really bad. Now, the fun part is FPS. This is the part that a lot of people I find also get wrong. Use 30 or 60. Don't try and be fancy and go for 48 or 59.94. Don't be that person. Either run at 30 if you can, or run at 60 if you can. If you're streaming something like PUBG or Counter-Strike, 60 is going to be the way to go if you can. If you can't, 30. Don't try and do anything fancy with FPS. Stick to 30 or 60. There's really no point going any higher. Alright, so does anyone have any questions about audio or video? Because I know they're two things that people often get confused by. Alright, I'm going to move on to hotkeys in advance. Hotkeys? Straightforward. If you don't have if you're not like me and you have a stream deck, but you have like a numpad, and you want to be able to switch scenes on the fly without having to alt tab, this is how you do it. I won't go much into hotkeys because it is quite literally self-explanatory. Now, advanced. Now, the one setting that I find is the most painful until the OBS 21 update was the process priority. If your stream while playing certain games, and I'm going to name drop PUBG in this case, stutters while you stream, chances are you're going to have to change the process priority to above normal. You are going to sacrifice a few things. Obviously, this means that OBS is going to have a higher priority than basically everything else. Now, what that means is your PUBG stream may now look really nice, but guess what? Now PUBG runs like crap. It looks nice on stream, but it runs like crap. I generally would tell people to just keep that at normal and adjust your game settings. Find a game setting that doesn't stutter. If you have an NVIDIA card, please use GeForce Experience to auto-optimize your graphics set. I don't know why it works as well as it does, but automatically optimizing your game settings in GeForce Experience fixes any stutter issues you have in any game that does stutter when you're streaming. I don't know why. I don't know how NVIDIA does it, but it works, and it is amazing. So keep that at normal. If you have a Stream Deck, if you go above normal, your Stream Deck doesn't work. It will just lag and not know what to do. Keep it at normal as much as you possibly can, unless you get really desperate. Now, video, renderer, Direct 3D 11, keep it at that. Color format, NV12, color space, so 1, and YUV color range, keep it at partial. Shouldn't really ever have to change these settings. And it's this whole page here, you can keep this as it is and really not have any. I would never generally recommend having a stream delay unless you were doing something like a replay buffer. Recording, obviously, that's where you can change your file name formatting. Audio monitoring device is where, say for instance, you want to monitor your stream's audio, like all of the audio, you could output it to a device. Automatically reconnect. This is great if your internet drops out, because guess what it's going to do? It's going to reconnect OBS to your streaming service. Leaving it as the default settings is generally fine. And network. Keep that to default, and generally you won't need to touch anything else here. Unless you've gone to OBS support on their forums or on their Discord and they've said, yeah, enable the new networking code and see how that works, don't bother. There's really no point. And that is the OBS settings. Really straightforward. So, does anyone have any questions about the OBS settings before I get into some things to do with audio and sources? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to disable the preview. So, I'm going to get into audio. So, as you can now see, if you're running OBS 21, you'll see these nice colored bars underneath your audio sources in your mixer. So as you can see here, as I talk, obviously it's going into the green and then into the yellow. So one thing to really understand about the new mixer is it's purely there to help you make your audio a lot better. Now you do this in combination with audio filters and what are called VST plugins. Now I'm not going to go too much into VST plugins purely because there are a lot of really good tutorials out there that are a lot better than mine, but I will glance over it just so you get a basic idea of what you're looking for. So as a rule of thumb, when it comes to OBS audio and stream audio in general, is say for instance you're running background music, and I'm just going to quickly just grab a nice piece of royalty-free audio so that I don't get destroyed. And I'm going to play this. Alright. Now, I've enabled something called audio ducking, which is going to lower that a little bit as I talk, and you can probably barely hear me talk. I'm just going to lower the Spotify audio. So, see how my background audio is in the green. Anytime you're using background audio, you want that to be in green. The moment that your background audio goes into yellow and red, it is too loud. You're going to overpower your mic. As a rule of thumb, you do want your headset audio or your output audio to be in the green, and probably around about the minus 40 decibel range, because then it's not too loud, but it's not too low. For your microphone, you always want that to peak in the yellow zone at some point. If your audio from your microphone is not peaking in the yellow, you need to adjust your microphone's gain, and you can do that via filters or simply adjusting the slider here. So as you'll see when I adjust the slider, you won't be able to hear me. You'll barely be able to hear me, but then as I bring it up, you'll start to hear me more and more and more and more until you can hear me pretty much perfectly. So as a rule of thumb, background audio, keep in the green zone, at least halfway. Microphone audio, make sure that it peaks in the yellow. Now, I'm going to go into filters really quickly, because I'm just going to glance over this because it is something that you can find far better tutorials for. The three main things you'll want, especially if you're using a really high quality desktop microphone, not so much if you're using a headset mic, is your noise gate, which basically reduces background noise. So once I'm talking at a certain voice level, you'll be able to hear me actually talk. Whereas if I don't talk, you hear nothing, because I've added a noise gate, which means that the background noise is filtered out. Now, the EQ is obviously so that you can adjust your equalization of your voice to get a lot crisper and not too loud, not too soft. I'm doing this via a VST, what is called a VST plugin. There are good tutorials about this for certain microphones. I'm using a Blue Yeti Blackout, and there was a really good tutorial on how to set this microphone up as good as I could. So this is my EQ. The compressor. Now, the compressor is going to be the most important thing to use if you scream a lot. So if you're really loud or you get really excited, the one thing you're going to want to put in your stream is a compressor. Because what it does is, say for instance, I decide to yell really loudly, it's going to compress it a lot. Notice how I didn't ear rape you? It's because I have a compressor. So as you can see here, it's compressing the audio down so that I don't destroy your ears when I get really excited or I decide to yell. That's what a compressor is. You'll want this if you have a really high quality microphone that picks up sound very sharply. I believe, forget the exact name of the microphone, but I know there's one that basically does this in it. But yeah, put a compressor on your microphone if you do yell quite a bit or you have a really high pitch. Gain is quite literally gain. So if your microphone is a little bit too low when you've got it at its stock settings, you can adjust the gain up and down as you please. Finding a sweet spot in the gain is the best thing you can possibly do. My microphone actually has a gain dial on the back to adjust the gain. I don't touch that because otherwise it makes the mic far too sensitive. It's easier to add gain in OBS. Now you can add a filter to your desktop audio now, which is called ducking. To add this, you literally go plus, and then you go compressor, and then down here, you get the option for a sidechain. So what does that do? Say for instance, you're running, say Spotify in the background, and you want to be able to be heard over your gameplay and your music. Well, if you add ducking, what it will do is it's going to, as you talk, lower the background audio so that your microphone takes precedence over the background audio. So it's really good if you've, say, got your music up to like 100, but then you want to be heard for a few seconds while you say something to chat. It'll literally bring the audio right down and then bring it back up once you finish talking. So this is a really nice feature they've added in OBS 21, and I do encourage people to use this. This is one of the nicest new features that I've found, and copying these settings here should get you really nice ducking. I found these via channel Fox. He's really good. So yeah, the ducking is a really nice new feature that they've added. And how you doing, Turtle? All right, now I'm going to show how to add a GIF overlay. Now I'm going to enable my preview for this again. And what I'm going to do is quickly sticks. Thank you, Turtle. All right, where are we? So, yes, there is Turtle. There's a couple of people watching, lurking, learning. All right, so GIFs. What you're going to want to do is go add, and you want to add a source. And you're going to call it something like GIFs. Okay, can't do that because I haven't got my audio sources in there. But if I was to switch to it, it's just going to be a blank source. A literal blank source. Now I'll show you this to you, obviously in studio mode. So here's my source. So when I enable it, in theory, I know it doesn't work on this thing, but all it is, it's literally just a blank source. But I've added all of these files, so there might be MP4s, WebMs, or GIFs. So you add them all in, and then what you do is in your sources, you add a scene. And what you're going to do is add an existing scene, and you're going to call it GIFs. And then, when I do this, look at that. And I have a GIF over this. And let's say I switch to my desktop. Wow. Or when I switch to AFK. Wow. I now have a GIF scene that is on every scene. Magic. So yeah, that's a simple way if you want to add like reactions to your stream, and then get them over every single one of your scenes. You make a scene, and then you add that scene as a source. Easy. Magic. All right. Now, what else is there? Yeah, I know. It's a little bit buggy at the moment. It should work, but it doesn't. Apparently it does work, though. We're going to have to look at that. It should. It should have sound. All right. What else have we got? That's really the basics of how to get your stream set up. Like I said, yeah, I was going to say, Turtle, there should be sound. I think on one of the scenes it doesn't work. Right. Yeah, there's definitely audio there coming through on the EQ. All right, now I'm going to get into any questions you have about OBS, and then what I might do, I might actually do a separate stream for Streamlabs, and maybe it's it. I'm going to do a separate stream this week for Streamlabs and Stream Elements. Just because I've got to set up a separate Twitch account to do that on, because I don't really want to do that kind of a thing on my main Twitch account, and I didn't actually have time to do that. So, does anyone have any questions about anything in OBS? And like I said, I'll do another stream later this week for Stream Elements, Streamlabs stuff, and I'll also go into how to set up Streamlabs chatbot if that's something you're interested in. But any questions about OBS or anything in general? And yeah, and I'll definitely get into. I need to set it up, but should be able to mirror my phone into the stream, so I can show you how to set up Streamlabs new IRL app. So I think the layout's very similar on Android and iOS, but I'll show both. So any questions about OBS? Yes. Pros and cons. I agree, Cat. Maybe it is Turtle. Alright, so no questions? Nothing you want to know? Like I said, I'll have this uploaded to YouTube and timestamped, so you'll be able to go to the specific point in the recording, look at settings and such. But yeah, that was pretty much the it's a very basic rundown. Games? What do you mean, Cat? What do you mean by games? Am I going to play anything? What do you mean, like adding games? Now everyone can stream Turtle. Everyone can stream thanks to this tutorial. Am I going to play anything? No, I'm probably going to bail and have some lunch, and I might stream later tonight. Yeah, I haven't quite decided yet. Where's my 3D printing thing there? Alright. Other screens lag when you run games. It's an odd one, Cat. I'm assuming that all the monitors are plugged into the same graphics card? It is 8.1. No, they're not. Okay. It's probably lagging because they're not all plugged into the same GPU. I know that NVIDIA cards have a thing. And yeah, I know that used to be a really big issue on Windows 8 and below. It's definitely fixed on Windows 10. I know that for a fact. But yeah, I think on Windows 8, they all had to be plugged into the same GPU. And there wasn't lag. But I think with separate GPUs, it was a bit crap.